All right, welcome everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's read some risk stuff, and if there are any questions about risk, we'll get those answered right here at the outset. Trading futures, options on futures, and retail off-exchange foreign currency transactions involve substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. You should carefully consider whether trading is suitable for you in light of your circumstances, knowledge, and financial resources. You may lose all or more of your initial investment. Opinions, market data, and recommendations are subject to change at any time. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Folks, only fund a futures account with risk capital. All right, that means money you can afford to risk without lengthening your retirement horizon or affecting your ability to maintain your lifestyle. All right, we are using leverage in this market. If you have any questions about where you may fall on the risk capital curve of things, or if this type of trading is appropriate for you given your situation, that's one of the benefits of working with a firm where the reps are Series 3 licensed, is that we can hear you out and we can actually give you sort of a recommendation on whether or not this is something that's suitable. So we're happy to discuss risk. We never shy away from it. We don't sugarcoat it. This is a risky business, and make sure you only put money in an account that you can afford to risk. All right. My name is Patrick Zielbauer, and every Monday we do a presentation that centers around some aspect of a very popular charting program among our clients called Sierra. So Sierra Chart is a charting program that basically comes bundled with your account here. So if you have an account with our company and you do 10 round turn trades, so let's say you buy one and sell one 10 times in a 30-day cycle, or if you buy 5 and sell 5 twice, or however you do the 10, then we waive the fee that we would otherwise charge for Sierra, which is $19.95. All right, so with a little bit of activity, you can get access to a very, very high quality charting program and a high level of support from us as well, without a cost. All right, it's a really good deal. Even if you are not active, let's say you open up the account, you want to sim trade for 3 months or something like that, it's still a little bit cheaper to get Sierra through us than it is to even go directly to Sierra Chart and get it directly from them. And like if you were to go pay with a credit card, they're a little bit more expensive, and we believe our support is actually strangely a little bit better than theirs, even though they're the authors of the product. All right. So in this presentation, we're going to talk about market profile. Sierra refers to this as what's called the TPO profile chart, time, price, opportunity. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to try to keep this event slightly abbreviated. So we're going to move a little quick, but we are going to record it and we're going to have it up on YouTube, and we're going to take as many questions as we can fit. All right. Please feel free to ask. If I don't get to it immediately, it's probably because I'm waiting until it becomes a little bit more relevant to what we're showing. And TPO profile is one of those things where it's a relatively complex study. There's a lot you can do with it. We're not going to cover the entire thing today. The idea here is to get you a quick start so you can do this on your own, and then we'll help you fill in the blanks as we go. All right. So thanks again for coming to the webinar here today. How many people remember when you had to pay like $300 a month to get a chart that had a profile on it? And there's still some programs that exist out there that are $200 or $300 a month. It's so funny how this industry has gotten so competitive, where these types of programs are available to customers. All they have to do is fund a trading account. 10 years ago, 8 years ago, even less, you had to pay crazy amounts of money to get access to a solid profile, or what some would refer to as like a footprint style chart, where you would have like a bid and ask depth, that sort of thing. It's just true. It just amazes me every day how cool this in-house stuff has gotten. So everybody should be able to keep their their monthly obligations very reasonable. In this presentation, what we're going to do is I'm going to take you through what I call kind of like a progression. So the objective here is to show you how to start from the very beginning with a default looking profile, and then I'm going to show you bit by bit by bit through a series of 9 files, all of which are open up here at the top right now. We're going to go one at a time until we get to the end. So what we're looking at right now is a 1-minute chart on the left, and then what we're looking at on the right is the chart with the TPO profile study added with no changes. And then in the next file, the chart you see on the right is going to be on the left, and we're going to tweak it a little bit, and that's going to generate what's on the right, and so on and so forth until we have something that is arguably a little bit more robust. All right, so that's the game plan. Please feel free to ask questions, and let's try to get something done. All right, so this is just a 1-minute chart of the E-mini S&P. All right, now when you add a market profile study to a chart, you change the structure of the chart. All right, in a very, very basic explanation here, the TPO profile is a totally different way of looking at the market because the graph does not move the way it traditionally does based on time. So you're not going to ever add, let's say, a moving average to a TPO profile chart. It just doesn't make sense. It's like apples and oranges. The only indicators that you can really add to a TPO profile chart and still have the chart make sense are ones that can be written basically in the form of horizontal lines, like price values. But if you're thinking about adding like squiggly lines and stochastics and stuff to your profile chart, just forget that. We're not going to do any of that today. I am going to show you how you can plot what some might say are relevant levels on a profile chart. That's going to come near the end. But let's just kind of get started from the beginning. All right. So on the left-hand side here, if you just right-click on any chart, okay, so just open up any chart, and the way to do that if you're unfamiliar is just go to Find Symbol, okay, right up here. All right, just type in the symbol you want. Okay, we're in the December contract now, so ESZ8, and then push Open Intraday Chart, and you're going to get a default chart. Okay, mine defaults to 5 minutes. Doesn't really matter in this case. All right, I'm going to close mine here just because I already have one open. And then you're going to right-click and go to Studies, and you're going to be looking for the study here called TPO Profile Chart. All right, TPO Profile Chart. And when you add it and push Apply, it's going to reload immediately, and it's going to look something like this. All right, so this is exactly what we see on the right side. For the sake of demonstration, I'm going to remove it from this 1 minute chart just so we can keep this intact because, as I failed to mention earlier, all these files will be available to anybody here who wants them. So if you want copies of the files to work off of yourself and you want to review them while you watch the recording on chartingclub.com or YouTube or something, you're welcome to have them. Everyone can have them for free. Anyone who's got a demo or a live account with us, I should say. All right, so when you get to this screen, after adding the TPO profile study, this is the default setting. So the TPOs, as we will say, come in block format, not letters by default. They're in block format. You've got a value area, which is in gray. Okay, value area in gray, and then all the rest of the TPOs are in bright green. All right, you've got this blue line, which represents the initial balance. Okay, basically like in what most use as the first hour of the day. All right, this represents the range, the initial balance. You've got the orange block, which represents the opening price. The magenta line that extends across all these is the point of control. And then you've got the midpoint, which is this little magenta block. And the little red thing here represents the current price, or the closing price of this profile. So a lot of information is contained within the profile itself. All right. You also see these lines here. These are called initial balance extensions. Think of it like a 50% extension of the initial balance. So if this is the first hour of the day here, this is like a 50% extension of that to the upside and a 50% extension to the downside. You can add a bunch more initial balance extensions. Some people do like 25%, 55%, or 50%, 75, 100, etc. You can put as many of them in as you want, but this is how they come by default. All right, so again, the gray area is the value area. The orange line is the opening price. The blue bar is the initial balance, all right, or the first hour. And then you've got the rest of the TPOs that are above value are this green color, and below value are this color. And you've got the point of control, which is this long magenta thing, and then the midpoint of the entire day right here in this little magenta block. All right, then the closing price. Chris, the 50% represents an extension of the initial balance. So it's basically a 50% projection of to the upside and a 50% projection to the downside of the first hour's range. So sometimes people are looking to say, okay, if the first hour range is A to B, then we're going to project that out a little bit, and that's maybe an area where the market might take a break, something like that. All right. Now, the interesting thing about profile, TPO profile, is that each of these blocks represents a unit of time, 30 minutes, not a number of contracts traded. This is one of the reasons why a lot of times people who use TPO profile charts use day session only charts, because if you're crediting a certain price with being important by assigning it TPOs because the market sat there and sat there and sat there overnight for a long period of time, it can give you the impression that that price level was very, very important. But in reality, what just might have been happening is nothing was going on, and lots of time was passing, and the market is sitting in between this tiny little range, and therefore the TPO is starting to build at those prices because you're getting a new block every 30 minutes. I'm going to show you in a little bit how you can split these into day and evening sessions. Okay, that's very important for a lot of people who trade this way. But for now, one of the things I would ask you to take note to mention is that if you right click and go to chart settings, my start time and my end time of the chart is the open Chicago time, which is 1700 hours or 5 p.m., and the end time is 4 p.m. the next day. So I'm including all 23 hours of data in this profile. If you want to have a profile that only has a certain amount of data, like the day session, you could customize these times. For example, if being in Central Time, I could say 8:30 to 1500, which would be like 8:30 in the morning until 3 p.m. So you have control over that. It's really important if you're going to be using this study that you know the start and end time of your charts. It's going to come relevant elsewhere as well. All right, the opening price, Brent, is the little orange block right here. That's the opening price. All right, so in this case, that would be the opening print in the evening, like 5 p.m., because this chart starts at 5 p.m. All right, so again, a lot of information is contained in this profile even without doing anything. We can see the price at which the market spent the majority of its time. We can see where the opening range was. We can see that there was a fairly even distribution of prices like this. That's what, this is like a normal distribution. All right, there's all kinds of, theories and double distributions, and some of these profiles look a lot cleaner than others. But again, remember, we're including the evening session here. So if the market just sat at this price right around here, which is around 28.93 for hours and hours and hours last night, that could create the illusion on this chart that that was a very important price level, but it might have just been the market not doing anything. So that's something to be aware of as well. All right, so again, this is the default look of the profile. What we're going to do now is we're going to go to the next chart book. And on this chart book, we see the same chart we had on the right side a moment ago. And then on the, on the left, on the right side of the prior chart book, that is now right here. So we've just moved on to this chart book. And over on the right-hand side, we're seeing the same exact chart except with the TPOs displayed in letters instead of blocks. All right, the way that you control this is if you right-click and go to Studies, you'll see that there's a setting in here that says sub-period price display style. Let me just expand this out a bit. It's going to default to blocks, okay? I don't even know what horizontal bars is. Most people use letters. When you Google market profile or you're in a trading room or something and someone shows something related to profile, assuming they're talking about a time-based profile and not a volume-based profile, which is what we've talked about in some prior events, normally you're going to see this in the form of letters. All right, so if you prefer to have the profile displayed in terms of letters, absolutely totally fine. Some people like to look at it just more visually like we see on the left. Other people refer to specific lettering, in their conversations with other traders or whatever. This is a style of analysis that was around long before keeping track of volume electronically was possible. So in my opinion, that's one of the reasons why TPO profile is, it came to be. It was a way for people to track how much time the market spent at each price based on something they could easily track on a watch like time. Very, very difficult to track volume when everything was done on the floor. It's all paper. So this is basically a way to see the concentration of prices that the market clung to during certain periods of time. And now that everything is electronic and it's very easy to track volume, you could argue that volume profile, I would argue in many cases, volume profile might be more relevant, but people still really like to look at the market this way. All right, and I'll kind of touch on that as we go through it. But all we've done in this chart book here is change the blocks to letters. That's it. No other changes. All right, so any questions on this so far? I know we're ripping through it, but this is mainly mechanics, and we're going to save the theory for another one. All right, let me know if there's any questions on where we're at this point. And I'm going to keep going, but don't be afraid to ask. So if we go to the next chart book over here, okay, next chart book is on the left. We see what we saw a moment ago on the right side. Okay, the TPOs are here. Nothing's changed with the times. We have letters instead of blocks. Simple enough. On the right-hand side, the only difference are some of the colors. I want to show you briefly how you can adjust the settings and the colors, and really the ones you're going to want to probably change the most. All right, if you right-click on the chart and go to Studies, you will see your study here listed at the top, And you can double click on it, or you can click on it and click on settings and go to the subgraphs tab. The subgraphs tab is where all of the colors from most studies are controlled. I don't usually change a lot of the ones that are in here. I prefer a white background of the chart usually. Last week it was kind of giving me a headache, so I was using a different color, but there's a lot of personal preference in here. But the main things that you're going to want to look at would be the first is going to be the TPO or block color, TPO letter or block color, which I have set to this dark blue. This is the one, the first one is the one that matters, and that's why this is giving us this navy blue behavior. All right. The next one is the value area color, which I darkened a little bit. That's why we're getting this sort of darker gray behavior. So the main things that you would want to adjust for the sake of aesthetics are going to be the TPO letter or block color. You're going to just worry about the first box, and then the value area color. The point of control color sort of speaks for itself. It's this magenta line, okay, in the middle. If you want to change that, you can change that there as well. We're going to come back to some of these, but you can see some other things in here, like the initial balance range color. That's this blue horizontal line. The opening marker, Brent, you were asking about where that was. That's this orange color right up here. All right, so there is a lot you can do with this study. This is not like adding a moving average to the chart where you just pick the type of moving average and the color. There are a lot of variables. Okay, you're not going to need all of them, but you should at least know how to manipulate the mechanics on the most pertinent ones. And these are usually where I draw the line. All right, so let's move on now. So and again, please feel free to to ask more questions. You're welcome, Ed. I'm glad you found that useful. All right, now if we move on to the TPO profile default number 4, the chart book. Okay, we're getting a similar behavior here, but this is the first time we're going to really change the structure of the chart itself. So on the left-hand side, we've got the profile, with the colors we just indicated, and we're still looking at the full 23-hour session, beginning at 1700 hours and ending at 1600 hours. All right, so 5 p.m. in the evening, all night, all through the next day until 4. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of times when people are looking at TPO profile, they want to separate out the day session and the evening session. How you separate the times between day and evening, there's no right answer. I've gotten everyone's opinion about this. No one's on the same page. You will have to decide for yourself, or maybe among your peers, how you want the day session and the evening session to be represented. Let me give you an example of how convoluted this can be, and which is why you shouldn't even worry about it that much. Okay, one thing is you could use the day session as only the stock market hours, so 8:30 to 1500. All right, the problem with that is that the market does trade for one more hour until 4 o'clock Central, and so if you include that 1 hour period in the evening session instead of the day session, you could argue that it's getting lumped in with like the Asian opening in the evening, but it's really not there yet. So, the other thing is some people don't use the last 15 minutes. So they might say, 8:30 to 1500 or 8:30 to 15:15 represents the day session. If the system, in my opinion, just like with everything else with trading, if that kind of a difference breaks the system, it's not a system, or it's not worth following. So I highly doubt you will see massive differences in the profile over an extended period of time, by using 15 minutes here or 15 minutes there, or even an hour. But just be aware that everyone looks at it a little bit differently. And if your chart looks a little bit different than your buddies because of something like this, it's not that uncommon. It's never going to be perfect. All right. Let me show you on the right-hand side here how we were able to split the profiles. You will notice that at the bottom, if I just zoom us in a little bit, we have 2 different profiles here. Okay, we have one that starts at 1600, and then we have one that starts at 8:30. Okay, so 1600 would be like the evening session, okay, last night, and then here is the day session today. Okay, so like up here would be like the opening print for the day's session. This is the value area for the day's session, point of control for the day's session. But overnight, this was our point of control. This was the opening in the evening. This is the first hour of the evening. This is the first hour of today. So you're really treating them like separate entities. All right, here's how we achieve that look. So you right click and go to studies. And in the settings section, there is a very important study that you need to make sure that you have, or a setting here that you need to make sure you have in place. And that is this one right here that says new period at day session start when using evening session. Okay, long, a lot of text there. This defaults to no. What this basically says is, do we want a new period if in the chart settings section we have elected to use an evening session? And so if the answer is yes, and we have a proper evening session set up in our charts, then the program will split the profile based on that day and evening session. So if you want this to happen, the first thing you need to do is come here and make sure this says yes. Okay, so again, right-click Studies, locate the study, click on the Settings button. All right, right here, Settings, and then scroll down until you see this section that says New Period at Day Session, Start when using Evening Session, change it to Yes. All right, after you do that, and it actually doesn't matter what order you do this in, but after you do that, you're going to right-click and go to Chart Settings, and you will see this section here that we just talked about a moment ago, where we have a session times. I have mine set to start at 8:30 and end 1 second before the close. So I don't want to have a new letter begin for 1600 hours, which would be 4 o'clock. So what I'm basically doing is I'm having the entire day session beginning at 8:30 Central Time all the way until almost 4 o'clock Central, which is 1 hour after the New York stock market closes, to use as the day session. And then I check this box that says use evening session, and I put in my own evening session, which begins at 4 p.m. or 1600 hours and ends 1 second before the New York stock market opens. So I have two distinct sessions. The reason I like to go all the way until almost 4, basically 4 o'clock, is because we're in the futures business, and the futures markets do close at 4. And a lot of times there is activity in the evening that can kind of get lumped in with the day session because Google or Apple or whoever is announcing their earnings. So in my opinion, I like to push it out till 4 o'clock. Some people might think I'm wrong, and they'd rather have this end at 1500 or 2:59 and 59 seconds, and then the evening starts 1 second later. Totally fine. Again, 100% personal preference. All right, so if you want your profile to be split between the day and the evening so you can clearly see the area that the market hung out at in the evening and where it hung out at during the day separately, that's what this will tell you. So when we look at this chart here, we can see that the overnight volume was concentrated in this area. All right, the daytime volume was concentrated in this area, and it's really daytime time, but there's also an assumption when you're looking at day sessions that the market tends to trade more actively at the prices at which it spends more time. All right, and in the evening, that can be pretty weird, because in the evening, when there's not as much activity, what if the market was at this price all night for like 8 hours, and then there was some crazy news around London, and the market rallies up here and trades a ton of volume way up here? Well, then what you could have is a point of control, up at this price in terms of volume, but not in time. So time, volume, yes, there are two schools of thought about looking at this, and some people actually combine them together, and we're going to do that here in a minute. All right, but this is how you split the profiles. Again, right-click Studies. Okay, locate the study. Look down for the section here that says New Period at Day Session Start when using Evening Session. Change that to Yes, and then decide what you want to use as your start and end times. Right-click, Chart Settings, and then put those in here. All right, any questions on this so far? Are we making some headway? Not a lot of talking, so I just want to make sure everybody's okay. All right, so please feel free to keep them coming if you need something. Let's move on to the next one. So if we go to the next chart book here, on the left side, we now have what we had on the right side prior. Okay, we've got a daily a split session profile. Okay, now over here we've added some other aesthetic elements, levels. All right, one of the things I mentioned about profile trading is that a lot of people who use profiles is that they have foregone the idea of looking at indicators that are sort of like these lagging, indicators like oscillators. Lagging has got such a negative term to it. I know plenty of people who trade, with market profile who couldn't trade their way out of a paper bag. Not to say that I necessarily could, but there's this sort of like haughtiness about profile style traders, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. You could argue there's some truth to it, but what is definitely true about people who trade with profile is that they tend to take less trades, and people who trade a little bit less in general tend to do a little bit better, I believe. And the reason that is they just tend to be less impulsive. People who look at profile style charts are usually waiting for the market to get to a specific price level, even if it just takes a really long time. They're not looking for necessarily one line to cross another, or if they get really antsy on the 15-minute, they just take the chart down to a 55 tick chart and boom, the lines are crossing. So it's like, let's go for it. All right, people who trade this way, they tend to let the profiles build, sometimes over days. And then they're looking for these predefined levels, and they're looking to trade off of those levels. So there is a patience that is associated with this type of trading. It's a really good chicken or the egg type situation. Is the person just really patient by nature and therefore has gravitated towards this style of trading? Or is it possible that they've just been put through the ringer and burned themselves out to the point where they want to be involved, but they need to trade in a way that doesn't require them to be, staring at the screen 24/7 or looking at very, very, small, indicators on short time frames. So I will say that regarding this style of trading, there is definitely a degree of patience required, where if you feel like you are over trading the account or just far too many signals, this might be a nice way to consider slowing you down. Jeff suggests, is this a style of trading that is, more based on the way institutions trade based on certain price levels? That argument has been made. There's really no way to prove that necessarily, but you certainly could. I think that is reasonable to suggest that idea. But at the same time, I think it's also reasonable to suggest that, institutions and, computers and the big boys and however you want to call them probably also know where those obvious, 61.8 retracements are. And, they know that right below the low, there's going to be a big swath of stops and they're going to plow right through that, just enough to get you. I mean, so I'm sure they're paying attention to other obvious areas as well, but you could definitely argue that, that some people that I've spoken with on that side of things have traded very large size, very far fewer times, based on these sorts of levels, right? Right, and the proof is in the footprints they leave in the profile, like the amount of contracts they trade and that sort of thing. Although that's not really detectable in a time-based chart, because it would be detectable in a volume-based chart, but not necessarily one based on time, which is what we're focused on here. But we will get into the volume thing in a minute. Now, on the right-hand side, you can see that we added some of these lines. So this is mainly aesthetics, but it is possible in Sierra to easily extend certain values out. So if you want to put labels and extend lines out a little bit so that you can sort of build this type of a look, you can easily do that. If you right-click Studies, go into the setting of the Studies section, all right, there's going to be some really very clear choices like extend value area to the end of period, extend TPO point of control to the end of period. Some people will extend these out until they are intersected again by another profile. All right, you could definitely do that too. Some people will say, I want to extend this line out into the future until it's intercepted again by the market. Some people do that. There's a term that is used to describe that idea in the profile or order flow community called unfinished business. Okay, it's kind of a silly term, but some people do refer to it that way, where they want to be notified of that level until it is again breached. All right, but for this example here, we'll just use end of period. So end of period for the value area and the point of control. I also have, if I were to scroll down a little bit, the extension IBR, that's the initial balance range that we talked about. Extension display mode and horizontal lines. That's like what this would be right up here. Okay, so this is like the 50% extension, and then here's another 50% extension to the downside off of this initial balance. So if you want to mark these lines up and create your own labels, you do have the ability to do that. What you do is go into the subgraphs tab and locate the ones that are most relevant to you, and you can actually just change these checkboxes, name label and value label, to have check marks next to them. Name label, if you don't put in your own short name, as I did here with VA. So see how it says VA here, and then we see this VA right here. If you don't put your own short name and you check the name label, you're going to get whatever the description is here, which it would be really long and to me kind of annoying. So it would say value area extension lines right here on the chart. In fact, let's just do that as a demonstration. So I'll just delete this, okay? And see, this is how it looks now. So usually when I check that name label option for anything that I want displayed in the y-axis area, I usually put in my own short name, something that just is, reminds me of what I'm looking at. So I just change this to VA, push apply. You can see it goes back to VA like that. All right, so this is a common thing for other aspects of Sierra as well. Really, whenever you're doing anything, where if you want to see the value label which is the actual highlighted price here. That's what this value label is. The name label is the name, and if you don't put your own name under this section right here, it'll put whatever the general description is. All right, so I put those in. And then also if we scroll down a bit, I did put the initial balance range extension line 1. All right, there's also extension 2, extension 3, extension 4. We don't have those displayed. So I just put value label, name label, and then just called it IB 50%. And so we're getting this value up here and this value right here. All right, so that's more of a general thing about Sierra in aggregate, is that if you are if you like to have those values displayed in the y-axis, that's what the value label is. If you want to use a short name, to shorten things a bit, you can do that as well. All right. All right. So Tiffany says, do you have a chart that has volume and market profile? Yeah, we're going to get there. We are nearly there. All right. So now we've made a little bit more progress. Let's move on to the next chart book, which is chart book number 6. All right. Here on the left-hand side, we've got what we just had on the right-hand side in the prior book. All right. But on the right-hand side, we've now added, Tiffany, good timing, a volume profile. So what we're seeing now on the right-hand side is the volume by price study added to a TPO profile chart. Because a volume by price study is basically a vertical histogram, it is one of the few studies that can be added to a TPO profile chart. Again, you can't add if you were to add a stochastic or a MACD, it wouldn't even work. It would actually just show up blank. It doesn't make sense to have something that advances based on time in the way a traditional chart was, but something that is just graphing horizontal lines or a histogram like this can be added. We're going to go through some other examples of that in a minute, but all you need to do is, and I'm just going to remove this for starters, is go down until you find the study called volume by price, click add, and push apply. And it's automatically going to load it like this. All right, we're going to customize this a little bit in the next one, but you'll notice that as soon as you apply the study, it actually changes the name to VBP for TPO profile or TPO chart. That means volume by price for TPO chart. In other words, when you add a volume by price study to a normal chart, it behaves differently. The chart knows that it's a profile chart. When you add the volume by price study to it, it automatically configures it in the proper format. All right, so that's how you add or create a chart that has both TPO or time-based tracking for the letters, and then you've also got a volume-based profile, which is based on contracts traded, not necessarily time spent at a specific price. All right, that is the critical difference between a TPO and a volume profile. Is one of them is based on time, another one is based on number of contracts traded. Okay, so let's go to the next chart book here. So default 7. All right, so now we have on the left side what we had on the right side prior, TPO chart, split profile, some custom levels put in, and then also a volume by price study added. All right, now on the right-hand side, it's the same thing, except a few changes made to the aesthetics of the volume by price study. So let me show you how you could make this look a little bit more useful in terms of the data points. So if you right-click and go to Studies, you're going to go to your volume by price study this time. This is the one that we added. And there are some things here that I almost always do. Okay, one of those is I always use a transparent draw style. Okay, so to me, it's just a little easier to see, this volume by price study kind of takes over things visually for me. So I usually like to use a transparent draw style. And then you can pick the transparency level anywhere from 0 to 100. Okay, so the higher the number, the more transparent it's going to be. I also use the transparent draw style with the volume by price study when I'm using a regular chart as well. It just makes it easier to see. It doesn't take over the candles and create a big mess of everything. So generally speaking, I recommend you do. The highlight value area is set to yes. Okay, that means we're getting a gray highlight for the volume value area. Okay, that means 70% of the volume that is traded in this session has been between these prices. Okay, that's what the number means, or that's what that gray area means. And then you also have the ability to extend the value areas off into the future, kind of like we do with the TPOs. Because of my interest in keeping the chart as clean as possible, I usually do not extend the value area of the volume profile if the value area of the TPO is already extended. It just creates lots of lines. Sometimes they're the same, and so they show up on top of each other, and I feel like I'm missing one. So usually with the value area, if I have the volume by price study on a TPO chart, I do not usually extend the value area because I can very clearly see where the value area is visually. I don't need another line. All right, but if you want to have the value area extended for the volume profile, you can easily choose that here, just like the other ones. You could say end of period. All right, highlight point of control, yes. Okay, so we're getting a blue highlight. I changed the color from the default of magenta to the blue color. I'll show you that in a minute. And then extend point of control to the end of the period. So even though I don't like to have the value areas displayed on the volume by price study, I usually do like to put the point of control up there. It's always interesting, to see when you have a point of control and of the volume and a point of control on time that are way off from each other. It doesn't happen that often, but sometimes you have a situation, especially after hours, like we mentioned before, where you might have a ton of volume traded at one price because the market moved dramatically, and then it just hung out there and traded a whole bunch of contracts. Look at this as an example down here. So if you look at the evening session of the 12th, look at where the TPO point of control is. This means that the market spent the most time at this price level down here around 29.81 or 28.91, but it actually traded the most volume way up here above 29.03. So what this might suggest, especially since these are so dramatic, is that the market punched right through a whole bunch of prices, didn't trade a whole lot, and then traded the most volume at another price. It's a decision. It's a total change in sentiment. So a lot of times when people are looking at point of control versus on time versus volume, they're looking for them to line up, to demonstrate how attractive or strong a certain price level was. All right, but sometimes, particularly in the evening session, you will see situations where the TPO point of control and the volume point of control are way different, like they were here. All right, I didn't really show this, but it's I know it's kind of assumed by now. If we go to the subgraphs tab for the volume profile, you can also change the behavior of the lines and the colors, etc. So the volume point of control, which is the one that I care about the most in this case, all right, I've got a short name, VPOC, volume point of control, name label, value label, and that's what is giving us this behavior. We get the value label here, we get the name label here. If this stuff being butted up against the y-axis of the chart makes you crazy, like you're missing something, just use your mouse wheel to create the desired amount of space, right click and hit lock fill space. You'll see a little capital L down here. Okay, the capital L means lock fill space is on. The E means we're using an evening session, so we've got a separate evening session. And then the 7 represents how zoomed in or out we are. So if we're zoomed way in, lots of space between each value, it's going to be a bigger number. If we're zoomed way out, it's going to be a smaller number. Steve, good question. I'm going to come back to that, okay? All right, let's move on to the next one here. Okay, so the next one, okay, is we're going to take it just a little bit further. And what we now have is we have what we had on the right in the prior screen over here on the left. Okay, so that's the split profile with the volume, some levels added, a bunch of predefined levels. All right, on the right-hand side, I also added another study. And I added the study called high-low for time period and daily open high-low close. Okay, so the high-low for time period, this one I'm actually going to remove. I should have removed this before, so I'm going to just get rid of that. I really want to just show one, and that is the daily open high-low close. So the idea with the daily open high-low close study is that because the study just represents a horizontal line, we can add it to the chart without causing a problem with the chart. So when you add the daily open high-low close study to the chart, the key item here is the reference days back. So if you have reference days back 1, that means it's looking at yesterday. If you have reference days back set to 2, it's looking at 2 days ago. If you have reference days back set to 0, it's looking at today. So the idea here was to very quickly create a way where I could put the previous day's high and low on the chart and create a label that makes it very easy for me to see where it's at. So that's what this P low and P high is way up here. So if we just zoom out a little bit, we're going to see that those jive with the prior day's profile. Okay. Now, how do we create this? How do we get this behavior? Let me just zoom back in for a sec. All right. If you right click and go to studies, okay, we add the daily open high-low close, go to settings. We're using 1 day back in terms of reference, And then in the subgraphs tab, I actually have the open and the close hidden. I'm only displaying the previous day's high and the previous day's low. Notice that name and value label are both checked, and we've got a short name, P-low, and then another short name, P-high. So with the daily open, high, low, close study, most people usually care the most about the high or the low. Today's high, yesterday's high. Some people do look at the previous close and the previous open as well. I just chose in this case to have those hidden, except I did leave the close up here, which that was mainly an accident. So you can change the draw style to hidden. I don't even know if that was being displayed. And now we're only seeing what we want to see. All right, previous day's high, previous day's low. All right. You can set the close, Chris, to midnight if you wanted to, but you have to do that in the chart settings where you create that start and end time. So I don't really think it makes sense to have anything close at midnight, because midnight really has no relevance when it comes to anything opening or closing. So I usually use like the actual session times if possible. I mean, you can really do whatever you want. I mean, again, there's no perfect way to do it, but midnight is especially not important because nothing open or closes at that time or anywhere even near it. All right. Zad, you have is there a way to toggle between two zoom choices, like 5 times straight to 1 time? I'm not sure about that. That's a good question. I mean, I actually don't ever use the zoom. I just put my cursor in the y-axis like this, and I just kind of drag left and right. So I don't actually ever use the zoom function. There is a zoom function under tools, under zoom in here, but I can tell you it's one of the things I've clicked on the fewest times since I've been working here. Let's put it that way. I'm not sure if there's a way to jump from one zoom level to another, but the y-axis or the x-axis here affords the ability to go in and out really, really quickly. So that's usually what I use. All right. Okay, so let's go to the final chart book here, and then there's a couple things I want to demonstrate, and then we'll probably wrap it up. But on the left-hand side, this is what we had prior on the right, okay? And except I forgot to take off that high-low for time period study, which was an error, and I also need to make this close set to hidden. Okay, so now it's exactly what we had before. Now on the right-hand side, there's a couple other things added. Now, we're going to introduce an element of complexity here that I'm not going to actually go into the greatest detail because we're short on time. But one of the things sometimes people like to do with profile is they end up with a chart that has tons and tons of levels on it. I've gone through this a couple times with people recently. I'm not necessarily opposed to having all these different levels on here, but just like a regular chart, at some point it's like, all right, how many things are you going to have up here? I mean, how much attention are you going to pay to each one? Does having all of these up here minimize the importance of any one of them? These are all valid arguments. I mean, these levels are important, but at the same time, you want to avoid clutter, just like you want to, probably one of the reasons why you stopped using regular charts in the first place, okay? One of the things, though, that people do ask us from time to time is, how can we set highs or lows for certain time periods, like yesterday's regular trading hours high, or yesterday's regular trading hours low, or the overnight low or high for tonight? How do we put that up here? Well, what I actually did with this chart is I open up another chart here, which is set. If you right click and go to chart settings, it actually is only the New York stock market hours. So 8:30 to 2:59:59. And what I did was I added to this chart the daily open, high, low, close study. So if we just kind of zoom out a little bit here, you'll see that this makes sense. Okay, so we add the daily open, high, low, close study. Okay, and it's looking back 1 day. So we reference days back as 1. I've got all custom names and labels here. So prior, regular trading hours, close. So this chart is only showing New York stock market data, and the study is looking at yesterday. Therefore, the high, the low, the open, the close that it spits out is going to be the regular trading hours high, the regular trading hours low, the regular trading hours close, and the open, because we're not including any overnight data whatsoever. There's no evening session on this chart. So these values, for example, 29.14 and a half, what I did was I went over to the TPO profile chart, and I added a study called study price overlay. So when you add study price overlay, instead of just clicking apply like you would a normal study, you have to give it some instruction. And what you then do is pick the chart number and the study you're looking to overlay. So the chart number in this case is chart number 3. So I'm going to locate chart number 3 right here. And then what on chart number 3 are we overlaying? Are we overlaying the main price graph? No. There's going to be a drop-down list here of what's available on this chart. In this case, there's only one study, so it's the daily open, high, low, close. So I'm picking that and actually applying it to the chart in what we call region 1, which is the main price graph. So that's going to default to 2. So I'm not actually going to apply this because it's already on there. Once you apply the study, it will actually change the title of it to reflect the chart number and the study from where it came. So ESZ8 5 minutes number 3, that refers to this number 3, and daily open, high, low, close refers to the name of the study that's being brought over. And what we are then seeing is on today's chart, we're seeing the previous day's regular trading hours high. And again, because this is a study that is just plotting a historical line or a horizontal line, it's something we can add. What I did then is I repeated this process, and I opened up another chart that only is working between 4 p.m. and 1 second before the New York stock market hours. In other words, it's just showing the overnight session. So there's nothing during the daytime session here. And then I added its own version of the daily open, high, low, close. And I put in some custom labels that represent the overnight high and the overnight low. So this is kind of redundant because we can sort of see the overnight high and the overnight low based on yesterday's profile. This is the evening session profile. But if you're just looking at today's session, you can very easily see a lot of data points that are relevant. You know, the high overnight, the low overnight, the value area for today, the initial balance range extension, the point of control based on volume and based on time, the previous day's high, the previous day's low, the previous day's open, the previous day's close. So when I say that, customers who trade this way tend to trade based on levels, this is what I mean. And, there is actually my boss, Jim Cagnina, who worked on the floor at the Board of Trade, has done presentations about theory about market profile. And there are some good events that we've got that will take you more into the why. But this is kind of like the end point of where most of our customers end up, once they start getting into this style of trading is, there's a lot of data points here. You don't have to look that far back. There are some really cool things you can do with the chart. I'll actually duplicate this real quick and tile them vertically on the screen. So this one here is a duplicate of the one we just had. When you have a chart profile or a market profile like this, you can actually right click and say merge with prior profile. So if you want to take this profile and merge it with the overnight session just to see how it looks for one complete 24-hour session, you could right click and select merge with prior profile, and it'll give you a composite profile of both days. Sometimes people, what they'll do is they'll actually repeat this process for like a whole month, and they end up with one giant composite profile for the entire month. All right, right click, merge with prior profile, and merge with prior profile, and you get something that starts to look like this. So you get a big picture view of like where the market has traded since the 13th. All right, let me do one more. Right click, merge prior profile. Okay, now we're getting a volume profile and a time-based profile on where the market has traded mostly and where it spent the most time since 8:30 in the morning on September 13th. So it's a pretty neat idea. And if you want to undo all this, you can just hit undo all merges profile, or you can reset it. But undo all merges, and then it just all goes back to where we were. Another thing that you can do with the profile is you can right click and you can choose letters and blocks in own column, which looks like this. Okay, this means that it widens the profile out because it gives people who are used to looking at regular charts a little bit more of a visual representation of the direction of the market. Some people like to do this because they can see that this is where we opened up, and at the end of the day, this is kind of where we're at down here. So they can see like the direction of the market instead of just in the profile form like this. So some people would argue that defeats the purpose of looking at profile in the first place, because really this kind of feels like a candlestick chart to me. This is where the market spent the majority of its time right here, but this is where we closed. There's varying viewpoints to that. But when you right click on a profile chart, you get a slightly different menu than if you right click on a regular chart. Okay, and that's all on the right side here. This is like the normal menu on my screen, and then over here on the right hand side it has all the stuff related to splits and merges and so on. All right. Pamela says, you call the VPOC volume. I've heard it called Virgin POC. Is this two different things? No, I don't. Well, yeah, actually, yes. I mean, VPOC. What I'm referring to is the volume point of control. The If someone is referring to like a virgin POC, what they might mean is a point of control that has not yet been touched again. So, for example, that's why some people will choose to extend a line out until future intersection. So you might have the volume point of control extended out into the future, and so like a week could go by and it still hasn't been touched again. So they would call that like a virgin POC, I think. So that means that the market hasn't yet gotten back up to that area. All right. Let's see, Champ, I think it is, right? Is there a way to quickly merge all of the profiles from a certain date, like from the beginning of the contract to the current contract? Yes. There's actually I believe, hang on. There is I'm going to put this video that we're doing today is a little bit more comprehensive, but I'll post this link to everybody here. It's a YouTube link where we've got a bunch of stuff that we've already talked about here today. And there is, I think what you're going to want to do is take a look at this one when you can, because this one talks about a cumulative time, which basically means you can set a start date, and then you'll build a profile from the beginning of that date. A lot of people who do that, like for example, energy traders, where crude oil rolls over on every single month, and they want a profile for each contract, you do have the ability to do a profile based on that. And maybe I'll do a separate video on that. I don't have one set up here, but it's definitely possible to do that. It's all controlled from the study section. If you go to profile period or your TPO profile study, the default setting is 1 day, but you also have the ability to do like a period of time at length end, or a fixed start and end time, start end time. All that can be done here as well. So it is possible to do that. Right off the top of my head, I'm not exactly sure how to format it, in the way that would make sense, but we did cover that in one of those videos, and maybe I'll do another one on that. All right. Okay, and then one other thing that I did want to mention too, and this really is more of like a display thing, but one thing you can also do to get a slightly more granular data, I guess would be the best way to say it, would be this. Actually, let me demonstrate this in a brand new thing, and then I think we're going to probably wrap it up after that. This is let's just add a regular TPO profile chart here. Okay, so this is what it looks like. Now I'm going to duplicate this and tile these on the screen vertically. And then on this chart here, if you go to studies and you go to settings, see how this thing says letter/price increment in ticks? This means that every horizontal histogram piece here represents 2 price movements, 2 ticks. Okay, if you change that to 1, you're going to get much smaller rows in each one of the histograms. It's going to look more like this. If you really like precision and you want to be able to see individual price levels instead of them grouped into 2s, change this first value from 2 to 1. The only downside to doing this is that if you have a regular size monitor, especially on a day where there's a large range, it can be really hard to read the letters. So if I change the letters here to sub-period price style from to letters, it ends up you end up with something that looks like everything's sitting on top of each other, because the chart is trying to display it all at one time. So if you have a very tall monitor or a high resolution, this can be better. If you have a regular monitor and you have a day where you have a big wide range, it can be really hard to display everything. Something to think about. Manny, is this from Blue Water? No, this is Sierra Charts, which we offer and support here at Infinity. Okay. Ivan, I'm not going to cover the footprint stuff because we do tons and tons of events on the footprint stuff. In fact, the last like 3 or 4 that we've done are actually up on YouTube, and a lot of them cover like the order flow, delta, all that stuff. We've gone through it quite a bit. All right. Okay. Is it possible to overlay the volume profile over the TPO profile? I believe that is possible. I definitely done that for someone else before. I'm not quite sure what setting that is here, but if you remind me via email, I will show you how to do that. How's that? Yeah, just shoot me an email on that one, because that's been brought up a few times, and it's one of these settings. I just don't want to stumble too hard over it. right now. Okay. All right. I think that's probably where we will leave it. I hope this is useful. The whole idea was to show, some sort of a progression from simple to, not necessarily complicated, but definitely a little bit more complex. Sierra really is a very flexible program, and the whole TPO profile, order flow, bid ask volume, delta, that has been one of the areas that this program has excelled and increased its capability the most in the last year or so. So if you feel like this is something you'd like to try out, obviously we'd love the chance to show you a demo of the program. We can give you all these files you can work with on your own. They're yours. All you need is either a demo account or a live account with us. If you have a group of people, I talk about this almost every week, like a little small group or a Skype group that you communicate with, if you feel like it would be useful to have a little private showing where we go through something that specifically you and your online trading buddies are talking about in an effort to better serve you and create a better experience overall, that's definitely something we're willing to do as well. So again, hopefully you found it useful. Let me know if there's anything I can help you with. You can reply to any of our email or call us directly if we can clarify anything. We do appreciate the opportunity. We really appreciate the referral business. We have had a huge influx of new clients recently. A lot of it has to do with the fact that summer's coming to an end, but I can also tell you that word is spreading about how phenomenal this program is, and there's no firm that supports it better than Infinity, and we look forward to staying on that path. So thanks again for your interest and for your time. We will have this up in chartingclub.com. If you have not registered at chartingclub.com, please do so. This is becoming an online archive. It's getting better and better. There's more stuff going in there every single week. If you register here, you will get an email from time to time that shows like a video demonstration of a particular study in Sierra. It's free to customers and prospects right now. It may not always be that way, but we do encourage you to register. We'll also have this video up on YouTube. All right, folks. Thanks again for your interest and your time. We'll see you next time. We'll see you on Monday. Trading futures, options on futures, and retail off-exchange foreign currency transactions involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. You should carefully consider whether trading is suitable for you in light of your circumstances, knowledge, and financial resources. You may lose all or more of your initial investment. Opinions, market data, and recommendations are subject to change at any time. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Alrighty. Thanks again, everybody. See you next time.